The way that we look at it from a homeless health perspective is that what led to the person feeling like that's their only option, rather than, that they just want to be homeless. It's like, why do they feel that way? Why do they feel they don't want to go into a house? And what's the cause behind that? And we look deeper into that.
For example, they're in domestic violence situations, have family dysfunction or toxic relationships that make the situation unsafe, and therefore they are forced into homelessness.
People are not begging on the street because they want to be, if that makes sense. So people are begging on the street because they're in poverty. It's not something that you want to be doing unless you do not have money, unless you do not have something, unless you're disadvantaged in some ways.
A lot of homeless people rely on the generosity of others just to get a hot meal or a warm coat. So that money that people give out, they're using it for daily necessities that we are blessed to have. I've experienced homelessness, and I've neither taken drugs or had a mental illness, and I've met a lot of people along my journey who also haven't.
So many other things that can cause homelessness, like family breakdown, social isolation, domestic violence, and other really complex things that can cause people to end up without a home and without support like that. The reason that we see a lot of men on the street is that most women don't sleep rough. Most women couch surf, they get into crisis accommodation, they stay with a friend, or maybe stay in a really unsafe situation, but it's more safe than sleeping rough on the street. So women are really vulnerable, and that's why you don't often see them. But the statistics say that it's roughly 50-50, that people experiencing homelessness are men and women equally. When we look at homelessness, we look at lots of different forms of homelessness, and we talk about it in 3 different tiers of homelessness. So the first is primary homelessness, which is rough sleeping. The second is secondary homelessness, which is sleeping in crisis accommodation. And then the third form of homelessness is actually sleeping like in caravan parks, unlicensed boarding houses, etc. So it's really like unstable accommodation.
In order to get a job, they have to have a healthy standard of living and somewhere to live. Often people who are homeless feel very isolated from society, so it's very hard to transition back into society, and they often lack the social supports that they need in order to get a job and be trained in that field.
We all know that rental prices are so high in Sydney, especially for private rentals, and the DSP and USADA are just a very small amount of money, and really you couldn't rent a place in Sydney as a private rental on that unless it was a place that I guess was out of Sydney and really probably would be extremely expensive, which wouldn't leave you much money for necessities.